Welcome back to the Better Men, Better Ball Player podcast. I'm your host, Trey Cobb. I want to thank you for joining us on our 121st episode of the podcast, where we talk to head coach at Stetson University, Steve Trimper. Coach Trimper, longtime veteran, ABCA clinician, Northeast guy, but has since been head coach down at Stetson University in Florida. We touched base about that. Guys who are at the ABCA understood and heard some of his speech. He was hit second behind Bianco and gave a really passionate talk about his drill work, his practices, and really just from the transition from being a Northeast guy to Florida guy. And we touch base about that, and we talk more about that, and we dive in and peel that back, and how he kind of did that and what all he did through that process and how he's changed. And, it was just a really great conversation. Coach Trimper is full of life, great speaker, very well articulate, communicated. And we touched base a lot about his book, too, all about winning, or walk-off winning, excuse me. Got the book. Can't wait to dive into it. But really articulates a lot of the things, too, about from the book and how he's putting them into his programs and how he's taken things that he's learned all through in even the business world and his chances and his opportunities that he's able to meet such great people that he put into a book, and he's put lessons that he's learned into a book. And we touched base about it and how he's incorporating those kind of leadership skills and these skills he's got throughout the book and throughout what he's learned into his teams, into his players. And then how he's spreading that all throughout the country with places that he's speaking at as well. So it's really just a great conversation, and we dive into a ton of things and how you could use it in your program, from how culture is changing, what culture is, just a ton of great information. I just love, his energy and his passion, and we had a great conversation. So Coach Trimper, really thank you for the time, and we hit the ground running, and it was full of energy, and I'm sure you guys. You enjoy it, and I really do enjoy it. So before we get started, I just really got to thank our sponsors. Netting Pros, netting professionals are improving programs one facility at a time. Netting professionals specialize in the design, fabrication, and installation of custom netting for backstops, batting cages, dugouts, scoreboards, BP screens, and ball carts. They also design and install digital graphic wall padding, windscreen, turf protectors, dugout benches, dugout cubbies, and more. Netting professionals continue to provide quality products and services to many recreation, high school, and college fields, facilities, and stadiums throughout the country. Contact Will Miner. Contact the guys at Netting Pros at 844-620-2707 or info@nettingpros.com. Visit them online at www.nettingpros.com or check out Netting Pros on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn for all their latest products and projects. And again, Coach Trimper. Oh, man, this guy. So beyond what he's done at Stetson, what he came from Maine, but just his first season with Stetson, he was just one game behind Jacksonville in 2017 for the conference title. That same season was tied for the most wins in their program history. In the second season, when their first NCAA title, regional title. In the second season, they were ranked in every national poll. He established a dugout club, raising over $100,000. Prior to Stetson, he was at Maine, where he won over 300 victories, 140 of them in conference play, tournament victories, 2 regional appearances at Maine. Former head coach at Manhattan College, school record for wins. Been assistant coach at Vermont. I coached at Wentworth College. Spent time in the Cape, Eastern Tide. We touched base a little about that. Like I mentioned before, national coalition, spoke just recently at the Nashville ABCA, and author of Walk Off Winning. So great book to check out. Now I'm just getting ready to dive into mine now. So here we go. Really, Coach, thanks again. Thanks to the Netting Pros. Guys, enjoy the great conversation with head coach at Stetson University, Steve Trimper.
Yeah, well, it's a really crazy story. I think when I was a young coach, I was fortunate enough to become a Division I head coach at 27 years old. So,
Wow.
so I kind of was like always trying to be better than everybody else. I was working harder. I was trying to recruit harder, teach people how to hit better. And so I think I went through that transition of like that young buck, that was trying to just outdo everybody. And after a while, I ended up transitioning from Manhattan College as a head coach up to the University of Maine. And I started to get into my late 30s and early 40s, and I was trying to figure out how these championship programs always won. Sure they had money and they had recruiting things, but how did Duke basketball always do it, or UConn basketball, or John Wooden did it back in the 60s and 70s? So I started to really study leadership and culture, and this was about 2007 and 8 and 9. So it wasn't really a hot topic back then. There was just, some coaching books out there. So I started reading all these coaching books. And ironically, 2008, we all know that there was kind of a financial crunch. And I was at University of Maine, and my athletic director at the time came to me and was basically like, hey, man, like, you got to help raise funds. Like, we're going through we're going to cut your budget. So I get thrusted into trying to raise, $50,000, $100,000 to turn the lights on. I mean, we're not talking about, building stadiums and things like that. So I ended up literally meeting a bunch of our donors who are very successful business people. So I start, going into these meetings trying to figure out if I'm going to ask them for money. And then I'm like, wait a minute, you went bankrupt, you went to jail for embezzlement, you turned around $1 billion company. Like all these stories were all about failures and then success. So I started legitimately taking notes about what they did in business, simply for the fact to come back and try to give something to my team, like how you can overcome this or how you can be a great leader. Well, lo and behold, about 2 years into this, one of those people who was a bank president up in the University of Maine area, big bank in Maine, was like, hey, man, you're really getting into this leadership thing. Would you come in and speak to our tellers at our annual summit? My first thing was like, what, do you want me to talk to a bunch of tellers about bunting or base running? So he's like, no. I've been, you and I've been having these great leadership talks. So I literally did like what sport and leadership is at my age, the group I'm working with, 18 to 22-year-olds, to how it can transition over. Well, fast forward, recommendations and referrals, and, over a course of 2010 to, I would say, 2017, I probably did like 100 of these to businesses throughout New England. I enjoyed it. And through a weird connection, I got hooked up with an author at one of these events his name's John Gordon. He's pretty famous for writing The Energy Bus and Power Positive Team. So he heard me speak, and we got talking. He's like, dude, you should write a book. I'm like, you're crazy. I can't even write an email, let alone a book. So I started jotting down some stuff. He hooked me up with his publisher, which is Wiley and Sons. And, 2017, 18, I started to get the idea to do it. And then 2018, we had a great run at Stetson. I mean, we were ended up 4th in the country. We hosted a regional for the first time ever. Went to a super regional, was one game away. I call it 26 feet away, which still drives me nuts, but from going to Omaha. And, so that summer, I really kind of hooked up with this publisher, and I ended up writing this book, Walk Off Winning. And really what it's about, it's 19 chapters of each chapter's a value that I learned through people in the corporate world that I kind of take back to my team. And it could be, what real energy is, or what does image mean, and how important the first 30 seconds you meet somebody and what that burns into someone's head, to attitude, to, all these words that you might throw up on the wall of a locker room or an office building. So I kind of dissected what these people taught me that were highly successful in business, all along trying to take it back to my team. But then after I wrote the book, it was all about business stories that people had me come in and talk about how I learned about successful business practices through sport. So it kind of took off. And, since then I've done a lot of great corporate speakings. I met some wonderful people, and, the book's been successful, but it was really a fun ride to go through, and it's still doing well today, as I sell them, from the publisher.
Yeah, that's super cool. Well, I mean, I just find it, so I find it really interesting too. Like, have you Has anybody ever like asked you to come in and speak to like their high school? I guess
Yeah,
the best, like different like even like to like schools.
sure. Yeah, I've done a lot of speakings to schools. I got to be careful of the NCAA rules and what
Right.
we're
That's
allowed to
I'm
do.
sure you got to jump through those hoops.
Yeah, so like I've done a lot of like like my old high school and things that I have connections to, but I've done a lot with teachers. I've done a lot with entire school systems that talk about leadership. But mostly the people that reach out to me is like corporate. So Wyndham Resorts, Ford Motor Company, New Balance, and you do a lot of their summits or the retreats where they're doing like annual meetings and you're their keynote speaker on leadership. But I've done groups as small as 10, from a local police department all the way up to 200 general managers from a huge Fortune 100 company. And ironically, what was good and bad is the book hit. It was published like in December of 2020, and then of course we had COVID hit. Or excuse me, 2019, and we had COVID hit in 2020 of January. So a lot of the stuff that I was scheduled to do when the book came
Yeah.
out all got canceled. So I did a lot of Zoom stuff and was speaking to like 3,000-4,000 faces on Zoom, which was kind of tough for me to do. But
Sure.
but all walks of life. I mean, any kind of form of business and sport and youth. It seems to be a lot of financial institutions and a lot of police departments hire me to do stuff.
Wow.
I know law enforcement's big, so
Well, that's good.
yeah.
That's good. What so like how have so within like the walk and their 19 values, is that something that you kind of break down with your team? Like, so is that since it's come out, is that something you're breaking down like all throughout like in a year?
Yeah. Well, first off, I will tell you this: if you think you can be good or great at 19 things, you're crazy. And that's
Yeah,
one of my
right.
biggest pet peeves. Is I walk into these huge companies, and on their wall is the wall of values or our principles, and I look at them, and sometimes there's 10, 11 things on there. I'm like, listen, man, like I've learned that you can't be great at all those things. So what I try to do is I try to show a corporation or a team like ourselves, like let's come up with 4 or 3 things that we want to be awesome at. Like for instance, at Stetson baseball, this is a practice I had in 2018. I actually asked our players over the winter break to send me a really important value back on a text. We were actually secretly renovating our locker room at the time, and I wanted to do a values wall. So I had people say Omaha, toughness, grit, leaders, winning, every word that you could have probably put up there, energy. And so when they all came back, I said, look at this, this wall with these great silhouettes. And I said, now it's impossible to do all these things. Okay. It's just not going to happen. I want you guys to go dumb this list down. And, my captains and the team went in there and they came back with like 8 things. And I said, I believe from my expertise, this is still too much. So those guys came back in 2018 with 4 things, which were integrity, excellence, commitment, and blue collar. So I said, you are the founding fathers. You are the ones that are going to put these 4 things on the wall, on our letterhead, on everything in our dugout. We are going to be committed to those words. And we're going to try to be great, outstanding, excellent at those things. So integrity, you're not cheating on a test. Like that's not what we want to do. Excellence. Like, did you practice excellent today? Did you pick up the trash in the dugout? Did you clean your campus up? Did you help the maintenance person at night with your locker so that they don't have to do it? What does blue collar mean? Well, that toughness, grit. Well, like were we that today? So it allows us to hold those 4 things accountable, not 14 things, because you can't hold somebody accountable to 14 things. So when I go talking to these businesses, I try to say, look, I appreciate this huge wall that your CEO just spent $100,000 on for this big graphic. But when I see 10 things on a list or a police department that has all these words, I'm like, you're setting yourself up for failure. Like what if you and I just decided we were going to be absolutely, we're going to operate with the utmost integrity through journalism and our speaking. And we are going to be, our image is going to be incredible, me and you. So we're going to always dress right. We're going to look right. We're going to always present ourselves well. We're going to always public speak well. Like, let's do those 2 things well so people remember us, And so that's kind of what my message is all the time. Now, the book has 19 of these because I was fortunate enough to be around so many great individuals that were CEOs, presidents, principals, generals of military, whatever walks of life that gave me, wow, I wish I could do that value. And I just kind of put them down and said, all right, here's a hodgepodge of what I've seen, which is great. Now, I admit I can't be great at 19 things, but pick some of these that I've learned that are really important to be a great leader, and you go from there. And really, leadership, I think where I get really annoyed is people want to have a great culture. Well, culture is changing all the time, week to week, month to month. In sport, players change, coaches change, weather changes it, umpires change it. In business, it's employees are changing, benefits are changing, the market's changing, whatever your, supply chain, all the things that you can use as reasons are constantly changing. So you constantly need attention to your culture. But in the same sense, it gets built because you have 4 or 5 really good values or traits that you concentrate on and go back to. When everybody concentrates on those 4, you become a good leader. Okay, so leadership to me is when the going gets tough, when you're failing, when the proverbial blank hits the fan, can you go back to those 4 words? Can you be excellent? Can you be committed? Can you be, blue collar? Can you act in integrity? Because it's easy when things go wrong to cheat. It's easy to find the shortcut. So can you go back to your 4 or 5 values when it's going gets tough? That's my principle. When you do that, then you have true toughness and true energy. See, fake toughness is 2 football teams in college football coming on at halftime and finger pointing at each other and telling us how great they're going to be, and I'm going to kick your butt, and hold me back syndrome, I call it. Hey, hold me back, otherwise I'm going to take this guy out. I've always said, let Miami and Florida State football fight in pre-game. Everybody's going to get suspended. Coaches are getting fired. They're not going to a bowl game. They're losing millions of dollars on TV because of that, because everybody did this. So I kind of always go back to that's fake to me. That's fake energy. Real energy and real toughness is, can you go back to your 4 core values or principles when things are not going so well? And that, if you can do that, now you're a leader. When you got a team of leaders or an organization of leaders, or, even in an office setting, if you have 4 or 5 individuals that can do that, now you're starting to establish culture. And that's what my whole principle is about what strong culture can be.
That's really, really good. That's I just even go back on your values when things get tough. Like, that's a great principle. So here's a question. So when they set the foundation with those 4, are you diving into them every year? Is that the foundation? Or like you said, culture changes every time? Or are you having that conversation every year and say, what are we going to be awesome at?
That's a great question. That's an unbelievable question. And so what I did when I said the founding fathers of the 2018 team moving forward, we set those 4 core values that we're always going to follow. So if I'm Nike and they have 4 things on the wall, or I'm Disney, Disney's core value is experience of a lifetime. I work with the Disney people. They want to give everybody experience of a lifetime. That's one of their 4 things. So that's never going to change. Now, the people are going to change. The employees are going to change. The environment's going to change. The demographics of Disney is going to change. The political landscape of Disney is going to change. Like all those things that you hear about. But no matter what, they're still going to say, we're going to give everyone, employees and people that are paying customers, an experience of a lifetime. That stays steadfast all the way through. So to answer your question, why I thought it was so good is that I really believe that you need to establish those 4 core values, or 5 or 3, whatever you think that your organization can handle. And that's your bedrock. That's what we're always going to go back to. But how we're going to navigate there is going to take us each and every week, year, month, whatever that's going to take. It's going to take us different paths there, because all the moving parts are going to be different. Think about a puzzle. Okay, my team's a puzzle, and I know what it looks like. The end picture is on the box. Like, this is what I want it to look like. But I got to make sure that all my puzzle pieces fit together. So sometimes I have a shortstop, or a center fielder, or a captain, or a freshman that might not fit into this piece of the puzzle, but they might fit over here. If I'm running a business, I got to figure out who's going to be good at management, who's going to be good at sales, who's going to be good at marketing, who's going to be good at accounting, who's good at HR. That's my puzzle piece that I'm going to fit around. But all those pieces, all those people / pieces are going to still follow our core values. But it's up to me as a leader to figure out where I can maximize all those people, the puzzle pieces, to get to the end result.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is essentially those four are going to be Stetson baseball, like those four,
Yep.
right? And then what you're saying is then what we're trying to do is maybe like the language, and as you like let's say you introduce like your freshmen or your new
Mhm.
guys to the program, to those, like how do you introduce those things
Yep.
to them?
Yeah. And again, I think a lot of times you rely on your people. If you did a good job, your people are your best educators.
Right.
So like our captains, our returning players. I say this all the time to each and every team in August when they get on campus, and I have 18 freshmen and 2 transfers and 12 returning players, whatever those numbers are going to be. Like my job is to give you the toolbox and the tools necessary to turn the team over to the team. Like,
Mm.
don't rely on me as the head coach. Like, it might be in August, probably not. Maybe it's November, probably not. But by January, when we're starting to open up in February, I want to turn the team over to the team, which means you guys know these values. You guys know what's important to us, these 4 core values. You know what it means to be accountable to those. So now hold each other accountable, police each other. If the dugout's left messy, if we leave work on Friday at noon and don't finish the task as a unit, we're not being held accountable to those things unless we all call each other out. So, do you need the boss to be like, hey, wait, time out. Get everybody back to the office. Like, we're not done yet. You guys didn't finish the report that's due, and everybody put it off till Monday because you guys want to go home and have a 3-day weekend. Like, that's not acceptable. Or do the employees now say, whoa, we're not done. Like, let's get this job done. We don't need to get the boss involved. We don't need the supervisor involved. Like, let's get this done. So I think that I'm constantly trying to have those young incoming freshmen, as you put it, to learn those 4 core values of excellence, commitment, blue collar, and just having those things come back to them, that where they understand that this is what we try to be. And I forgot integrity for a second there. I was drawing a blank. Like, we have to operate in everything that we need to do with those 4. So like we're allowed to call each other out at all times. Like tonight's a great example. We just moved into your brand new $8 million stadium. It's gorgeous. It was our second practice. Okay. And we've been practicing up at a practice facility. It's a high school field for 9 months. So all these freshmen really don't know what it's like to go through this great place. Now, we had a great place for years to come. We just upgraded it big time. So tonight was the first night, we really had, a night practice. I came home to get on the podcast with you, and I watched our guys, and I watched all of our upperclassmen take the fan rakes and the brooms, and they started to put the clay back, and all. And I saw our freshmen just standing around, and so it was up to our upperclassmen to be like, look, we have grounds crew and we have student managers, but take care of your own stuff. Like, let's show that leadership of acting in excellence, because we want this field to be the best in the country. And so all of a sudden I watched the freshmen kind of dumbly look around and be like, oh, maybe I should do something. And they were aimlessly just taking a broom and brooming turf that they didn't even know what they were doing, but they were trying to mimic these older guys because they were trying to, say, hey, look, if they're doing it, I got to do it because we're part of this program. Now, it seems like a little minute thing, but, I think that's where I really kind of branch into another part of what we try to do is, ironically, when I wrote this book, I got with an awesome publisher in Wiley, and my editor, her name was Vicky. She only did high-end authors, like the big time ones, the John Gordons and the Semics and the Maxwells, the ones that we see that are all over the place. So when I wrote this book, you would send her a chapter, and she would track change it and then send it back. And of course, she was miffed that I would just hit accept all and send it right back to her, because she said, you used to fight with all the other authors. I'm like, you're the expert, just do whatever. But when I got to one of the chapters, it was about ego. And why I bring this up is every author she worked for or worked with always talked about humility and egoless. And my chapter is about, if you want to be great, you better have an ego. It's the name of the chapter. And so she was like, whoa. This might not be the greatest title. I said, look, Vicky, read the chapter. And so what I basically say is that in order to be great, you got to have an ego. So here's my ego right now to you on this podcast. I think I have the greatest pitching coach in the country, better than any pro team, better than any college team, Daniel Latham is awesome. My recruiting guy, he's the best. My two shortstops that are fighting out for the job, they're better than LSU's. They're better than anybody. My president is the best president to work for. My AD, Jeff Altier, he was at practice tonight. There's no AD in the country better. So I'm egotistically telling you how great I got it. My enemies, my competition are going to tell you that I'm embellishing this, okay, or I'm BSing. Me, I'm telling you I'm optimistic. However, so just to kind of branch off of what we were talking about with ego is, I think a lot of people kind of take that ego, which is scared to people, like they're scared about talking about having an ego. And like, I kind of champion that, where I really believe you need to have an ego to be great. And, I talk a lot about, how I said, like my players and my athletic director and my coaches, I feel like I have the best around. However, where I changed that topic is once I formed my team, my organization, my program, my office in the world of corporate, the corporate world, is that like the ego goes out the door. So for instance, like tonight, I was raking. I was picking up cups. I'm the head coach. My AD is doing the same thing. My freshmen are seeing that. So you got to learn to check your ego at the door or leave it in the parking lot once you form your team. But prior to that, I want everybody outside of my team to know that we have egos, because, that's where we can kind of form that humility within our own ranks. When they see the head coach is out there picking up the cups and I'm raking the mound tonight in this multi-million-dollar facility, they're going to be like, wow, he appreciates that, so we have to do the same thing. So I think that scares people sometimes when they say, look, have an ego to be great, but I think it's a strong point of being a leader.
I think it's a fine line, but what would you say is the difference, ego and confidence?
Yeah. I'm probably going to, people are going to disagree. I said, there's probably not much of a line between ego and confidence. Here's the thing is I can't control my competition. I can't control the weather. I've tried. I can't control the umpires. I've tried. None of that works. So what I try to do is I just try to take care of the people that not that I can control, but that I have some kind of impact on. And so like when somebody says, oh, you're overconfident or you're egotistical or you're an embellisher or you're a BSer, like it doesn't bother me because all those people that are saying that aren't part of my organization, So my job is to take the people inside my organization and make sure they don't say, oh, you're a BSer. You're you're an embellisher. I need them to say, hey, you're an optimist. It's basically, it gets back to attitude. When you have someone that's got an unbelievable optimistic attitude, they're positive, and you have somebody on the other side of the room that's just the negative Nelly, the one that is just, everything is wrong and their shoulders are down. Where do you go? Like in the first 30 seconds, where do you gravitate towards? If you're just neutral, you're going to gravitate towards that guy. You're going to be like, I want to drink with that. Like, let's think about this in a business setting. And I do this a lot with bankers. Monday morning, had a great weekend, you come in. Do you walk in with your knuckles dragging, with the Monday morning blues, being like, oh my God, this sucks. I can't wait till Wednesday when it's hump day, and I can't wait till Friday. Or what about that person that comes in and be like, oh my God, I had the greatest weekend. I can't wait to tackle the week. We're going to be awesome this week. We're going to take sales to the roof. We're going to open up 10 more accounts. We can do it. If you're in the middle, you're going to go right to that person that's positive, and you're going to gravitate towards them. So I try to say, like, that's the optimistic part of you. That's my job as a leader, because I want those guys to go to war with, to go to the trenches with. I want to go to business meetings with. I want to go to games against competition with those people, as a person that's always, not optimistic, or the one that's always saying the shoulda, woulda, coulda. The negative Nelly is the one that's always saying shoulda, woulda, coulda. I would have done it better if I was the head coach or the CEO. I could have done it better. You should have done it differently. Like, shoulda, woulda, coulda to me is like the negative Nelly that I try to avoid as we go forward.
I love how you said, like, inside of your organization, those are the people that I don't want them to say I'm embellishing and things like this. So essentially, like, how you're building trust, like how you're building trust. So like, what are the things that you do to build that trust?
That, man, I'm almost going to say, did you read the book? So chapter 19 is called True Success. And really, this is my ultimate thing. So we're jumping ahead. If we had 3 hours of leadership discussion or team discussion. So ironically, when I speak to my guys and I speak to a lot of businesses, one of the exercises I do is I ask them, what is success? Word association, go. And so I'll be in front of 300, corporate people, and I'll do that exact same, scenario. And a lot of times on the spot, they'll say, well, I want to, hold down a good job, and I want to provide for my family, and I want to send my kids to private school, and I want to pay for their college, and I want to have a nice house. And then, of course, my players, like, we want to win championships. We want to go to Omaha. And what I try to say to them is, all right, everything you just said is a reward. Okay, money, possessions, fame, and wins, they're all rewards. It's not really a success. It's not a measure of success. So I back it up a lot. And when I talk about all these values, these 19 values, and you can start building what's good for your portfolio and you're building your team, you said something that was remarkable in your question. You said the word trust. So really what I'm trying to do as a leader, okay, of a baseball program and trying to help CEOs build their company, or principals, or the military, or police departments, you need to find what you believe are good people. So whatever that defines, value, what you think is a good person. When you invite them onto your team or your bus or your apartment or your whatever it is, now the hard part starts. Now it's up to you as a leader to build a relationship. In 2017, I took over Stetson. I came in January. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody's name. The other coach abruptly retired. They hired me. We're playing 4 weeks later. So I didn't know who the bench player was to the All-American. And so I went through that year and we built, a pretty decent year. At the end of the year, we finished second in the conference. We went to the finals. And that summer, I asked everybody at the end of the year, like, who wants to return? And I had 10 or 11 people be like, you didn't recruit me. You're not my coach. No problem. Like, let me help you. Let me, not be part of your unhappiness, but let's also try to help you out. But I had a core of about 15 guys like, yeah, we're all in, coach. So that summer, I didn't recruit. I went and visited every one of those guys in their summer leagues. I showed up in Butte, Montana. I showed up in, Newport, Rhode Island, wherever they were playing summer ball, because I knew they were playing. So they're not going to miss the game. So they're like, Coach, what are you doing here? I'm like, you know what? It was important for me to come and visit you. And so my goal is to build a relationship, which is why I say that's step number 2. Good people, step number 1. Second step, the hardest of them all, build relationships with people. And when you start to build that strong relationship with somebody, and I use this example all the time in the world of business. Let's say your son or daughter are playing, youth softball or baseball, and they're on field 10. And one of your newly hired employees has someone similar age that's playing on field 1, and they're at the same time. How important is it to you for to miss 2 innings of your own son or daughter's game and walk over and be like, hey, Mary, hey, John, how you doing? Well, hey, boss, what are you doing here? I kind of knew your kid was playing. I just want to come over and watch your kid play and hang out with you for a couple of innings. Like, that builds relationships, okay? Now, you sacrifice your own time, your money, your energy. That's what happens being a leader. You sacrifice a lot sometimes. But what you're trying to do is, when you build that relationship, then number 3 and 4 happen of the success plane. Number 3 is you start building trust, what you said. Everybody starts to trust you. All right. So when you're like, hey, man, I think that this is what is going to be best for our program, everybody's like, okay, coach, we got your back. Okay, we truly trust that this is what we're going to do. I need everybody today to stand on their head and, do bicycle kicks because it's going to make us better hitters. Okay, coach, we got you. We trust you. Or you don't know what the hell you're doing. Like, that's what's going to be the answer if you don't have that relationship. Now, when I have trust, I have the last one that comes, which is loyalty. And loyalty is probably, to me, the most valuable of them all, because through thick and thin, through failure and success, they stick with you. So let's fast forward to a corporate event, a corporate setting where we got a dictator boss who's telling everybody what to do. He's always barking at them. He never builds relationships. And it's now the December 24th, and everybody's supposed to go home Friday of the 24th to go to Christmas at noon. And the boss comes in the office and says, hey, I screwed up. The board of trustees needs me to get this report. You guys got to finish this. And everybody's going to be like, mother, like they're like, you got to be kidding me. Like this ass came in and said this. They're going to like just like loathe that day. Okay. All right. Because they didn't build a relationship. What happens if I'm the CEO that has built a relationship and has got those people trusting me and they're loyal? And I walk into that and go, everybody, I screwed up. It's the 24th. I told you guys can go home in an hour, but like I'm in a pickle. Like, is anybody here can brainstorm? You know what happens in that setting? Everybody says, we got your back, coach. Everybody sharpen the pencils. Let's get this done. Let's knock this out. And 3:30 comes and they hand the report and the boss is like, you know what, guys? Thank you so much. You know what happens in that setting? They now become number one sales team. They now become number one at what they're doing because they all were loyal at that last minute. And a month later, the boss deals out bonuses and everybody goes and buys jet skis and builds big houses and gets all those rewards they wanted in the first place because they were loyal and they were trusting of their boss and their situation and their culture. So, so success to me isn't about the wins or the money, the fame, possessions. It's about those four core things about good people as a leader, surround them, build those relationships, build trust and loyalty, and you'll get those rewards of jet skis and houses and Fortune 500 magazines, and ultimately going to Omaha, in a college baseball. So, I kind of live and die by that philosophy to get to when you mentioned trust. It just kind of hit a chord with me because I think it's a very important trait that comes out of being a good leader.
I mean, and even just like you said, that's where you can say the things that you say other people might say that you're embellishing, but inside the program, your people aren't saying those things.
Yep. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Like I said, how can I be quote unquote embellisher when they don't trust me? Because they're going to call me inside my program. They're going to call me a BSer. But I need to get those, my people inside my organization, my team, the ones I put here. You remember, I say that all the time to our players. Like, I brought you here. I brought you here because I thought you were going to be great. So, like, if I'm running a business, I'm going to first and start off everything. Like, I hired you because I thought you were able to take my job. I brought you here because I thought you're going to be the next CEO, So, like, I have 35 individuals on our team right now. I tell them every day, I think every one of you, I brought you here because I think you'd be an All-American and a professional player. And I've had many of those guys that are the same talent that you are. So, like, they need to know that I believe in them because I brought them here in order to say, look, I trust this guy as we move forward. And I want to get into all this, leadership stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. And even just to be able to, like, for me, that's almost like even like the ownership,
Yep.
You're trying to also create just ownership inside of the program. Like with these leadership lessons, like, is this like a weekly thing or is this just something daily that you're doing inside of the practice plan?
Yeah. Another great question as you go forward, because I've tried and failed and been successful in different ways of getting this message across over the last, 6, 7, 8, 9 years since I've really dove into this. And really what it is, it's a series of, short meetings that I have with the guys to kind of introduce this stuff. But you know what I've found to be the greatest asset for me is I've been really fortunate to be around some highly successful people in sport and inside business. And so some of the people that I use in the book, senators, governors, like I said, all these people that I've been able to just build relationships with, I ask them to come and speak to my team. And what we do is in the fall, I usually bring in between 6 and 8 speakers every fall. Now, I've had Senator Collins from Maine. I've had, Congressman Mast. I've had, Eric Semler, who runs the largest IT hedge fund in the world. I've had Charles Johnson, who owns Franklin Templeton. I've had everybody you can imagine over the course of these years come in and speak to our guys about their plans of leadership. And ironically, it's amazing. I can sit there all day long with our guys and be like, look, you got to operate with integrity. You got to be excellent. You got to outwork everybody. You got to, deal with the failures. And they're like, yeah, we got to coach. We got to coach. And then all of a sudden I have Charles Johnson walk in, who's, the billionaire, CEO, owner of Franklin Templeton Investments. He owns the San Francisco Giants. He says the exact same thing I do. And they're like, oh my God, it's like God, it's like coaching your own, talking to your own kids. It's like, pick up the trash. And then all of a sudden somebody walks in your house and says, pick up the trash, and they do it, So I do try to bring in a lot of people that are leaders. I bring in, our chief of police. I can, the list goes on and on and on of the highly successful people I brought in. And I'll tell you what, a lot of people I bring in are, uberly successful financially. Their businesses are booming, and they tell stories of failures. I mean, you wouldn't believe the people that got, whacked on embezzlement or whacked on fraud and spent 2 years up the river and was able to come back. And I mean, like, no joke, like, these people had failures. So when you think you struck out 4 times in a row and that's the end of the world, that ain't like, that's not even what failure is if you want to continue to come, be successful. And so I think that to answer your question, like, I bring a lot of guest speakers in that I trust, that are mentioned in my book, that I know deliver a good message. And like, I've been blessed to be around those people, but I wouldn't be the person I was today if I didn't go to some of these highly successful people and say, how did you do it? I think, one of the biggest parts, and this is kind of spurring off, is I try to force our guys to communicate. I am so happy about one thing tonight. I called you, and I've been so busy. I've been like, I got the stadium going, I got all this stuff going, and I'm like, oh man, I got this podcast I got to do tonight. I'm excited to do it. And I called you when you reminded me of the time. And I'm like ready to do the phone. And you're like, hey man, like, don't you remember? Like, hey buddy, I sent you the link 5 times. Did you check your email? I guarantee that's what you were. And I'm like, oh my God, he did. I was so excited that I was on Zoom, because you and I are communicating with emotion and voices and faces. And I write a lot and talk a lot about that factor of being a leader and being a strong culture, is that you got to communicate, because so many times I'll pick up the cell phone and try to call somebody, and they'll put me to voicemail and be like, what up, man? Or my player will be like, hey coach, what's up? I'm like, pick your phone up so I can talk to you, Right. And so I like the point of having our guys learn about the communication side of things, of public speaking and talking. And so with that being said, communication isn't always about all the talking. I mean, I'm on a podcast to talk about a book and Division I baseball, so I'm doing it all. But a true communicator would turn the conversation to you. Like, I should be like, hey man, tell me about your podcast. Tell me about your family. I see all those hats hanging about. How did you acquire those hats? Like, those are things that get you engaged to be like, wow, he cares about our conversation. And so what I learned from all these highly successful business people that I bring back is I ask them questions. Like, tell me about your success. Because ultimately my communication with you is about you telling me what you did to make you successful, so I can go tell somebody else. And so I try to have our kids understand that when they go to a class, their job the first day in class is ask the professor 3 questions about themselves. And so when they walk into class, it's awkward. But they walk in there and they say, hey, Professor Smith, I see that, you're driving a electric car. Do you really like the electric car? Oh, I do. Me and my wife, we really enjoy it. Oh, you have a wife? Do you have a family? No, we don't. We have a pet. Oh, what's your pet? A dog. What kind of dog? A lab. Wham, there's your 3 questions. So then all of a sudden, kid, the professor now remembered you. So now when you're sitting in that class and you're going between a D and a C, or hopefully it's not that bad, a B and a, they're like, man, that guy was engaging, and let's bump him up. And so that's why I try to talk about that. Communication is so big that we try to get across to our kids so they can have that ability to do that.
Yeah, I really like that. Just intentionality. Like, because I see you see a lot of guys now, just doing certain things. I see guys now like they'll take pictures with their professors the first day of school, like, which is good. Like, again, they're just trying to create their relationship. Yeah. Which, like you said, it is going to definitely help them down the road. Man, that was really good. Just about even the asking the questions, that was really cool. And enforcing us, it is because I think the communication piece right now is pretty big, because it's very easy to send a text. It's very easy, and we have to be more intentional about it. And but I can, man, I guess you could speak on this, is like, when you talk to a guy on the phone as a recruit, I would honestly say now, do those guys stand out that can really talk to you more than
Oh,
ever?
yeah, boy. You know, I'm keep giving you props here, Dre. You're asking great questions. Like when I talk to a recruit on the phone, they stand out immensely when they communicate. And listen, I know what it's like talking to a 15, 16, 17-year-old. It's tough. I mean, like they're talking to a Division I coach, or it's hard to do those things. But I'll tell you where I see it more so is we recruit all summer, and we're out there looking at 1,000 kids, and 1,000 of them can play. And then you start to figure out which ones qualify academically, and then the ones that the coaches talk highly of. So in theory, you're trying to get down 100 kids that you're going to try to get 10, 10% success rate, right? In sales, if you're doing 10% success rate selling with cold calls, you're pretty good. You're making a lot of commissions. So we're kind of the same way as college coaches. But I can't tell you how many times I tell this story. Is I'll call somebody once I get their cell phone, a recruit that's legally allowed to be called for their age, and I'll wait for their voicemail. And when I get the voicemail that's like, hey, you've reached John. I can't take your call right now. Please leave a message. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I'm like, hey, John, this is Coach Trimper, head coach at Stetson University. Saw you play last week up in Lake Point. Really was excited about getting you down to look at Stetson. You're a person we'd love to make a hatter. I'd love to talk to you about a scholarship at some point because you're definitely a scholarship player. And I hang up. And then the next person I call, and it might be just like, ring, ring, ring. You've reached 64744. And I'm like, I might leave the same message, but I'm kind of like, I didn't hear his voice. And then I get the third one, which is like, ring, 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 boom, 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 boom. Yo, mother, leave your message. And I'm just like, beep, hang up, throw it down. I'm like, that kid just cost himself $260,000, because of his image. Might be a great kid, but like I just didn't connect to him in that first 30 seconds of that image I got. So like that communication part about talking to somebody on the phone, and it's funny. I grew up in Northeast. I went to high school in New Jersey. Then I coached a lot of my career in New England, and you get the Boston, New York kind of stigma where everybody's talking fast and just kind of like talking over each other. And my wife and I moved to Stetson in Florida, and they call her Miss. Everybody here, Miss Lisa, Miss Lisa, Miss Lisa. And I'm like, God, that's so impressive. Like no one do they mean Mrs. Trimper, Mrs. Trimper. But like little things like people communicate in different parts of the country in different ways. And, so I think that when I call a recruit, I'm really, if there's one advice I can give to somebody out there that's young and listening to this, and maybe trying to advance themselves inside their workforce, who's a fresh college graduate, is have the ability to talk and communicate and ask questions of the people that are around you, because it's impressive when they do that, as opposed to deflecting or texting or emailing, because you don't get that emotion. It's one thing that COVID taught me is like, Zoom's great, and we're doing this here, which is kind of cool, because we might be doing a podcast and not on a phone if we didn't have COVID.
Right.
And we're seeing each other's faces, and my gray hair and, your red hair, and, like I see your age versus my age. And like, that's kind of a cool thing. But during COVID, I had the book come out and we weren't coaching. Like, I really missed having that interaction with people. And I think a lot of people can say that. So I think that communication is key to talk with people.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you touched base about the Northeast, and like, how has that all been? Because I mean, I can just imagine it, because I was at Nashville, and you kind of mentioned that a little bit in your talk.
Yeah.
Just like the transition from Northeast to Florida.
Yeah, I mean, obviously on a baseball front, if we're going to talk baseball for a little bit, it was a great transition, because I was used to trying to create baseball, inside, and when you don't have a dome or a stadium that's covered, it's tough to do that compared to what you have down here. But I brainwashed myself, and I told everybody, it's not that hard and it's easy. And everybody was like, what an embellisher.
Right.
I was up there telling them, who cares what Miami has? We can go down there and kick their butts coming out of the gym, So, but the transition was great, because I was able to practice year round with our guys and really take my coaching ability, I believe, to another level, where I could could really give as much as I could. I wasn't concerned about breaking windows or marking up the gym floor and having my athletic director get mad at me because I told him the baseballs don't mark the floor, and asking for forgiveness as opposed to permission, what I used to do a lot. So I think that transition was a great one. I think when you move to a different area, you got to learn the culture and the environment a little bit more. And I think Maryland up. You're from Maryland and New Jersey and New York and Delaware as you go up into there. It's a little bit more hustle bustle. Like we're used to dealing with the ups and downs and the traffic and the weather and the ice and the snow and the people cutting you off. And the one thing I've learned is, you don't take offense to it. I'm sorry. Like I lived in New York and people would be like, give you the finger. And then it was like, hey man, you want to go get a beer? It's like, oh, okay, cool. We're good. Where I think down in the South, it's a little bit more, not slower paced by all means, but just a little bit more respectful of like, I had to listen a little bit more. Like I had to learn to listen a little bit more. I talk about communication and ask those questions. Well, you can't dominate a conversation as much. I think in Boston, everybody talks over each other. It's a skilled trait. Down here, I think I got to listen a little bit more. And I'll tell you, one of the things I did learn is I came down here as a coach, and I was all about the toughness and the image and the practice harder and get the dirty uniforms. So we're wearing pants. We're not wearing shorts. We're practicing 3 hours. We're doing sliding drills. We're going to do PFPs. We're going to get after it. And these new players who are just learning me were like, yes, coach, we don't want to, tick him off. We want to earn his trust. And so they just listened to me. And in a way, I was a kind of a dictator. I'm like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we did it in the Northeast. And I was used to like, hey, guys, the sun's out. We got 45 minutes before it's going to go below freezing. Let's get it done. I get down to Florida and it's 90 degrees all the time. And I'll never forget my first year. I had Logan Gilbert, who was a sophomore who went on to be a first rounder. Brooks Wilson, who was the John Olderud winner for the two-way player in the country that year. He's actually on the 40-man with the Braves right now. So they just met me. And after about 5 weeks, I remember Brooks was our captain, came, he's like, Coach, Trip, like we know, like we love the intensity, but like it's freaking 90 down here. This ain't Maine. Like we're getting our ass kicked. And I had to like change the way I coached. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you're right. Like, I used to come down to Maine and play Miami every year. Coach Morris, great friend. There's this weird Maine-Miami tradition where Coach Frazier back in the 70s and 80s and Coach Winkin at Maine were best buddies. So they have the same Old English M. The clubhouse has the exact same footprint for both of them. They shared their plans when they built it in 1989. So we would go down there every year, and I'd be like, look at these, cocky son of a guns wearing their shorts, taking BP with a T-shirt, not sliding, not playing hard. We're not going to take BP like that. We're going to hit 10,000 ground balls and show these guys we're tougher. And then I get to Florida, and I'm like, I'm beating the hell out of my kids because it's so damn hot. So I had to learn how to change the way I coach with the environment moving south and kind of slow it down a little bit more to get the most out of my guys.
I bet. Like, man, what even another lesson to learn, to teach, so like I said, like your lesson of learning the culture, which then, like you said, had to provide the best experience to really see the guy. And then also you just not having enough ego within your organization to listen to your guys.
Yeah, it's complex, man. Like, that's the thing about this whole leadership thing and coaching in college baseball is, you got to learn how to protrude that you have the trust and the loyalty and I guess the ego that everybody will trust you. But you also got to be able to have enough that you can check it at the door, like I say, so you can listen to your guys or you can recognize when it's time to change. These ABCAs that we went to are great. And I've been to them. I think my first one was 1994 in Nashville. Ironically, it's always in Nashville. But, I really feel like I learn more and more each year as I go. And like when I stop that feeling, then it's time for me to stop coaching. And, one of the greatest honors I've had, in my career was this past November. I got invited back to Manhattan, my first head coaching job. And, they had their Hall of Fame event and I went into it. And like, I always hated talking about these kind of like personal things. And I didn't even tell anybody Stetson. They were so mad at me that I didn't tell anybody, and I just flew to New York, and they found out afterwards because I didn't want to be on the webpage or,
Right.
it's I don't know. It's kind of like a thing I just don't want to brag about. But going back to it, there was two great things that happened that weekend. Number one is that when I got to that event, I couldn't imagine how many of the former players that were in their 40s and only 3 years younger than I was, ironically, came back to that event. We had 30 alumni come back that played for me in that 6 year span that were at that table. And, we shared beers and stories. And I remember saying this to them. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, they're like, Coach, you helped us out. I'm like, guys, I was 27. I didn't know what the freak I was doing. Like, my biggest travesty in life is I wish I could take this, my knowledge now and go back and coach those guys.
Yeah.
And give that to them. And of course, that was kind of like, no, we kind of brushed it off. But that was like one of the nicest things that happened to me that weekend. I also was invited to the Golden Glove Award dinner, which I've never been to in New York. It was the same weekend. And my former shortstop at Maine was given the glove that weekend, and him and his family invited my wife, Lisa, and I to go, which was Jeremy Pena. He played for me at Maine.
Oh, nice.
And he was my last, before I went to Stetson, he was a junior. And so he ended up having a pretty good career when he left Maine and had a really good year. So that weekend was kind of special to see some of the kids I just recently coached have success. And then some of the, the players that I coached that were literally in their late 40s, and I'm 52, they had kids and they had, their own 10, 12, 14-year-olds coming back that weekend. And but I guess I wish we got on this topic for a second. I wish I could have given them the knowledge I have now from going to ABCA and talking to people like you and, finding out how to write this book. And, I did a disservice to them. But I still feel like, in 3 years from now, I hope I'm better than I am today to these kids, and that's our jobs as coaches and in sport and as leaders.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But but it's also like, due to where you are now is because those experience that you did have, it seems like where you are now is from that experience and where you're at. Oh man.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, it is. And listen, this wasn't because I figured it out. I have no secret sauce or key to the puzzle, to the door. I just was able to, over my time, I think we all try to, find people that have really good messages, and we try to, in a way, steal it, regurgitate it, or even better, mold it into what works for you. And I think that's where I'm at.
And that's, I tell you what, now I'd like to go back to because that brings it to what I was thinking about with your speakers, because I bring in speakers and I think people do that. Do you bring them in saying, okay, I know we have to, let's say, work on our excellence, right? Or, how we're living. Do you envision a guy like, I know this guy is going to be able to touch on that? Or do you just bring in a guy?
No, I don't just bring in anybody. I try to bring in, yeah. Like, I think that for me, it's about.
Like, will you like tee it up for the guy and say, hey man, like, we're struggling in excellence. Like, I'd really like to hammer this home.
That's another great question. I never, ever have somebody speak to me where I preface like, hey, look, I need you to talk. Because, I feel confident that when I bring a speaker in, I know their message is going to be so strong. And so ironically, when I bring somebody in that's a CEO and whatever, military, like all these different people I think are great leaders, I literally tell them, I don't want to preface what you're going to talk about. I want you to tell me why you've been successful. How did you get there? What did you learn? And I sit back and I take my pencil out and I take my notes for my next chapter of my next book or my next topic I'm going to do. So I learned so much from these guys, even this past fall. I had 2 Blue Angel pilots talk to our guys this fall. I mean, these guys are like Navy grads, played football, fought 12 years in the theater over across the way. And then the way that the Blue Angels I learned is once they put 10 years or plus in, then they're allowed to be on the Blue Angels for 3 years. And then they finish up their 6 or 7 years back in the theater. And then they retire after 20. And so like I sat back and was like, he's like, what do you want me to talk about? I'm like, how'd you get here?
Yeah.
How did you build Franklin Templeton, Charles? How did it happen? And the message is really the same. It's amazing to me that it could be I learn something new every time, but it's all about these people saying what true hard work is and what they dealt with failures. They all screwed it up. They all were prepared for the screw ups, and they all were able to get out of the screw ups and the failures quickly and quicker than other people, which made them rise to the top. So to bring them in, I don't want to, misconstrue what they're saying. I don't want to pigeonhole them in to say, look, talk to me about how you are you act in integrity inside the financial world of, investments. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. I want them to share their stories of success and leadership. And I think that the people that I talk with or to get in there, it's amazing how much of them have screwed it up. I think that if you're a leader, you're going to fail. Like, I've screwed it up so many times. I've sent people, with one out, they got thrown out. I've made the wrong call. I've, bunted when you should have hit and run. I recruited the wrong guy. I got to own all of those and be accountable for those. But any mistakes I made were always passed to my next success, and when you don't look at it that way, like failure is not final. Like, failure is not fatal and final. It's not the end. Like, I've always looked at it that way. I really feel like it's a path to you getting to the next step if you have the right mindset, and I think that that's one of the things I protrude when I bring these speakers in is they all talk about how their failures led to their next success.
So, and that's what I was good, because it's always like, people get, I think, and maybe this is where the ego comes in, is like leading someone astray from like the message and what we're trying to deliver.
Yeah. I mean, it could. I think that the biggest thing I learned is that you can't have that ego once you're talking to people. Like, if I'm running a team, if I'm running a business and I'm a CEO, like, I need to show them that, like, not only am I in the trenches with them, but I've been in the trenches and here's my experiences. Now let's have you figure it out. Like, I can't tell you what to do. Like, I've been in trenches, so do it my way. Like, that doesn't work. It's like, I've been in trenches. This is how I screwed it up. This is how I got out of the trenches. Now let's see if you can, get out of those trenches on your own, and I think that's where the ego gets checked, where it's like, be one of them, but also guide them in a way to try to help them be a little bit, but don't let them not fail. Like that's the thing. If you do everything do you really want to do your kids' homework? Like, what justice are you doing if you're doing their homework for them to get an A? So, like, I think that part of failure and that part of leadership is like, you're going to have to let them fail. Winning is great and losing sucks. Like, I'm telling you, like, we celebrate every win. There's no such thing as a bad win. Like, I hate when people say that was a bad win today. Like, we should have really kicked their butts. We only won by 4. No, I don't. It's hard to win. Like, it's hard to win at anything. So, like, we celebrate every win like it's the World Series. Like, you'll see us like, yeah, we won 15-0. We won against the number, 300 team in the country. I don't care, because winning and losing is tough to deal with. It's tough to win and it's tough to deal with losses. But those losses, I hate to admit this, there's sometime with the right mindset could be the greatest path to your success. And if you don't have that path, you're going to be on a losing streak. Like, our job as coaches is not have losing streaks. Like, tell me the last college baseball team or professional baseball team that went undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
Never happened. It's impossible. Like, you're going to lose a game, And so my point is like, expect to lose, but the teams that are really good that only go 50-10 are the ones that understand that loss was good. Now let's not get there again. Let's learn from those losses.
Yeah, I think your preface does, and it might have people might not have caught it, as some losses with the right mindset can lead us to the right path, as like what you kind of mentioned there. That was awesome.
Yep, exactly. The right mindset will get you to the future successes.
No, that's just like, like Coach Bianco. He was like, you just see about Ole Miss and what they went through last year. He touched base about that.
He was great. And I'll tell you what, Mike is when my book came out in 2020, it was at Nashville again. I don't know how many you've been to, but it was at Nashville. And
I honestly am on the one to say, I think it could be at Nashville and it just changes every 4 years somewhere else.
Exactly.
Like, I'm on that train. Like, I'm
fine. Yep.
I'm good, because I was in Chicago and Indianapolis, and I'm like,
yep,
I'm good with Nashville every year.
Me too. I'm fine. It's a great city and it's a great venue.
It is.
It was funny because I'm a Rawlings guy. Like, I've been on their advisory staff forever. So when the book came out, I didn't buy a booth. I mean, I'm not selling my book. I didn't know what the hell to do with a book. But my wife came and she's like, "Oh, well, Rawlings told us that we can set up in their booth." And Rawlings is a big sponsor, so they got the big booth and the big leather chairs. So my wife sat there and sold books at first convention when you're trying to sell it and get it out there. And the first guy that bought the damn book was Mike Bianco.
Oh, that's awesome.
He walked right up. He's like, "Trim, we played each other for years." He's like, "I got to read the book." And I don't know if you remember in his speech this past year, he talks about how he gets up every morning at 6 a.m. and he reads. And I'm telling you, that's the God's honest truth. That guy reads every day, because you know what he did this year? I haven't talked to him in 2 years. And I sent him a congratulatory text when he won the national championship. But when him and I were practicing backstage on Thursday, we were at the same practice session. He was like, "Trim, hey man, in chapter 7, on page something, I can't remember what page, he's like, you were talking about ego, and like, I really like what you were talking. And then you jumped into image on chapter 12. Like, he read every page of my book."
Yeah.
And so, like, he's a real big leadership guy that talks about successes and failures. And he's done a tremendous amount of reading, sport and non-sport, on failures and successes as we go forward. And you saw it in his season last year.
Mm-hmm.
I love that graphic. They were 7-16 or something.
Mm. 7-14. Yep.
7-14
in the conference.
In the conference, in the bottom part. And, we're talking, in April, mid-April, he could have cashed it in right there. The kids could have. And, that's true leadership. And that's just, a testament to how good Mike has a grasp on those players and the trust and the loyalty that those players have with their head coach. That's hard to get. Like, you got to work really hard to have that culture.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just that was a remarkable story, but like I said, the right mindset of being able to use those. But, it certainly doesn't hurt playing in the SEC either.
That's right. Exactly.
But that's still hard. It's still crazy hard.
Yeah.
So very hard indeed. Oh, man, Coach, this is awesome.
Well, great.
This is big awesome. So I guess just like you speak to these guys. How does you talk to the 6 to 8 in the fall? How you're getting right after it now in the spring. How do those conversations come in the spring? How do these leaders? What's it look like in the spring?
Yeah, I think that the majority of what we try to do is in the fall, so that, like, I made a statement earlier about when do I turn the team over to the team.
Yeah,
and I think if I do my job as their head coach, I'm starting to get those good feelings, about this time of year. Hey man, today we're undefeated. We haven't lost a game yet, so I haven't dealt with the failures and adversity, and we haven't put up a starting lineup yet, so the kids don't know who's starting and all that. But today with this 2023 team, I feel like the core nucleus of guys that were returning, the incoming guys, I feel like this last 6 months together, we've gotten to a point where we have grinded on leadership. We have grinded on, those core values, and we even threw a new one in. I've been kind of doing it over, Twitter a little bit, is, we were trying to kind of keep it fun. And, there's this word out there called moxie. People know what it means. It's like, if you look it up in dictionary, it's like, you got a little moxie. I'm like, oh, it's like swag. It's a little toughness, a little that. Well, in Maine, there's a soda called Moxie. It's a can. It's an orange can. And they only have it up in Maine. It's gross. It's like cough syrup. It actually came out in the 1800s. If you read the history of Moxie, it was prescribed to get rid of a cough. It's a cross between root beer, Dr. Pepper, Coke, but the recipe got screwed up and it's all syrup when you drink it. So Mainers drink it and they're like, you're tough if you drink this Moxie. So my daughters play ice hockey at the University of Maine. They're seniors. So over winter break, they get a week off for their season. So I made them load 4 cases of Moxie into the check-in bag that was coming down because it's so expensive to ship the stuff. And so I bought an orange shirt that says, distinctively different, have some Moxie. So every week, at the end of the week, I give a player of the week the Moxie Award. And they actually poke a hole in the bottom, maybe not the greatest thing image-wise, and they shotgun his pan with Moxie at the end of practice on Sundays. And we've done it, all spring. And my point is like, what do you got to do to get that? Well, It's not about that you just struck out 12 guys in the scrimmage or you hit 2 home runs. Last week was Jonathan Gonzalez. He's a left-handed pitcher. He's going to be a weekend guy for us. And he cut us up, man. Like, he went 4 innings, He did well. I don't think he gave a hit up. He might have had like 6 strikeouts, no walks, got a lot of ground balls. He had like a 41 pitch count. And as soon as he got off the mound, and we were playing at Sperling, which is our practice facility, which is a town field. So you got your nice baseball field, no stands, just dugouts. And then you got a softball field, then you got a soccer field, a football field. It's a sports complex. So where's Jonathan for the next 4 innings? He's running foul balls. He's out there on the field collecting foul balls and running and getting them. And I wanted to talk to Jonathan about his performance, but I'm like, "Where's Jonathan?" He's like, "Oh, coach, he decided to be the foul ball guy for the next 4 innings."
That's
So like,
awesome.
that's my Moxie guy.
That's it.
That's the guy for this week. So we kind of do little things. Moxie's not up in our locker room. It's not one of our core values, but it kind of is a byproduct of what we're trying to do after we went through the 4 core values and the speakers and the whole fall of trying to get this done. I'm still trying to pay attention to detail to that culture, because let me tell you, if we get 8 speakers in here in the fall and practice these 4 words and try to become excellent, try to be committed, do all those things, and then I sit back in January and be like, "All right, guys, go." And I think I'm kidding myself. I think we're going to do it. Like, you got to pay attention to it all the time. But with that being said, if I do my job, I got Jonathan running foul balls, and I didn't
That's
tell
right.
him to do that, so that's part of the byproduct of trying to build the culture.
Now, I was thinking like the Moxie thing too. Was that your kind of feel of the culture? That's like that's what you kind of needed to, like you needed that.
Yeah, I think probably I was trying not to be corny with
Yeah,
today's age, but I also want to give a little niche. Like, guys like that stuff. They like
sure.
that weekly shirt that gets passed. You wear a badge of honor, And so I told him the story of Moxie, and I actually, and you can do this yourself after this podcast, so your listeners can go Google Moxie and the definition. You'll read exactly what I'm talking about. Then go Google the Moxie company, and you'll read exactly what I just told you. So I showed them the history of what Moxie means, and my time in Maine was awesome. Like, I was there 12 years. I didn't grow up in Maine, so I'm not a true Mainer. As they say, Maina. They don't say they're ours. But I was there 12 years, so I think I was anointed 25% Maina. As I went forward, and they have this little quirky thing about how tough it is. It is. I mean, it's 0 degrees. It's sun sets at 3:30. In the winter time, it's not easy. So like, I tried to get that to our guys to give them a little bit of like, "Hey, look, like, I learned this in Maine. Let me bring it to you. But let's try to be like a Mainer. Let's try to, if they think this is so tough, let's do it ourselves and have a little moxie." So it's something that now on week 5 or 6 we're on here. Like, tonight was Tuesday. It was our first practice of the week because we have Mondays off. We were flying around tonight, and I heard many people be like, "Coach, I want that Moxie Award. Coach, hey,
That's
let's get a
right.
little Moxie." So like, there were, home run balls tonight. The wind was blowing out. We had home run balls going out like crazy because it was like 30 miles an hour blowing the left field. I had my captains out there getting home run balls. You know what? They're trying to prove a little Moxie, I think. They want that
That's
award.
right.
Gives them a little bit something to shoot for.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, you got him. You got him there. Oh man, coach, it's been. I want to. I respect. We've been sitting here at an hour. Man, like it flew by.
Yeah.
Just want to respect your time. I know I really do appreciate you just taking some time. And I know with the brand new stadium and all, like you could be a lot of different places, and I just can't thank you enough for for giving me some time, man.
Yeah, no, Trey, like when I got your text and your DM on Twitter, I was like, yeah, I love doing this type of stuff. And I really like enjoying meeting new people, because I'm pretty sure this isn't going to be the end of our relationship, and we'll follow on, and we'll probably see ourselves, next year we'll run into each other at the ABCA or something. But, I wish you all the best. I wish all the people on your podcast and
Coach Steve Trimper, just crushing it. Just a really fun conversation, just loaded with great information. Highly recommend the book, Walk Off Winning. Multiple listens, just the amount of great information. I love the ways in which he clearly communicates culture. 4-step process to get success. Final thing is loyalty, right? When you got to come in there, I'm like, guys, like, we really need you here. I got you, coach. I got you. Like that loyalty, like that step of getting good people, creating a relationship, building it, forming the trust to get the loyalty. It's a very great step, and it's certainly, when you look at what is success, as you're starting to define that. I just love the clear communication, the great energy. It was just a really great conversation. Really had a great time. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I got some great things from it to how to build any organization, any structure, any team, and really just how he continues to mold that and grows that. And again, another example of how it's player-fed as he turns it over to his guys, especially come springtime and towards the end there. Again, Coach Trimper, just really appreciate you. Best of luck this year at Stetson. Hope you guys are great. And thank you guys for listening. Big shout out to our sponsor, Netting Pros. Until next time, keep getting better.